And we are live! Good evening and welcome to Mishnah Mastery! Hooray! We've got our live virtual studio audience joining us on Zoom. But wherever you're watching from, we are going to be learning chapters 7 and chapter 8 of Maseches Bechorot. We're getting ever closer to the end of this particular tractate. And let's get ourselves underway. So we've been talking about animals, and now we are going to be talking about people. And interestingly enough, the Mishnah kind of segues away from Bechorot to talk about Kohanim in the Beis Hamikdash and the blemishes that invalidate a Cohen from doing avodah, from doing active service in the temple. But since we've been talking about blemishes in different things, so we move on to talking about blemishes as well with regards to Kohanim. So Mishnah Aleph of chapter 7, 3 types of blemishes that are going to invalidate a Kohen. So there are some where if he did the service with certainly with animals that have been blemished, like we saw previously. But in some instances, if a Kohen is not allowed to serve in the Beis Hamikdash, so there could be some that he invalidates the Korban, and some where he doesn't invalidate the Korban, but he's not allowed to do it. So says the Mishnah, Mumin Elu, Ben Kavuin, Ben Ovrim, Poslim Ba'adam. So the blemishes which we taught with regards to an animal, whether they are permanent or temporary, they can also disqualify a person. They would disqualify a Kohen from serving in the Beis Hamikdash. So we talked about people with, we talked about animals, but I guess now we're transferring that to people with particular eye blemishes, ear blemishes, boils, warts, all these different kinds of things. So these can disqualify a person from serving in the Beis Hamikdash. But then the Mishnah says, Yoseh Aleihen Ba'adam, there are additional disqualifications that can apply to a Kohen, and they're all to do with disfigured heads, disfigured head shapes. So the Mishnah says, Hakilon, which I've got translated as a triangular head, and it says a head someone whose head is pointed. Vahalaftan, turnip head, yeah, there you go, turnip-like. Hamakavan, hammer-like. Visherosha shakua, somebody who's got a sunken head or an indentation. Ushkifam, and someone, I've got flat head, it says on the screen here, where the back of the head is protruding. Uvale hachatoteres, somebody who's a hunchback, is subject to a machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Yehuda says these people are still fit for service if they have a hunchback. Chachamim poslin, and the Chachamim disqualify them from active service in the Beis Hamikdash. We could talk for hours on why this would be. Is it fair to disqualify Kohanim on external appearances? We could give a whole share on the concept of disqualifying Kohanim, but we're not going to do that covered in the perek of the Mishnah itself. But yeah, don't think that it's not a question if you actually have it. Mishnah base. So hakereach. So this word kereach, we're going to try and understand what that is now. But it seems to be some kind of baldness. So hakereach pasul. This type of person is also going to be disqualified. Eizahu kereach, asks the Mishnah. What is a kereach? Says the Mishnah, Kol she'ein lo shita shel seah makefes me'ozen la'ozen. Somebody who doesn't even have one single row of hair going around his head from ear to ear. So I guess it's someone who is completely bald. Ve'im yeshlo, if he does have any hair, Harizeh kasher, then he would be kasher. He would be fit for active service. Ein lo gavinim, if he doesn't have any eyebrows. Ein lo gavin echad, if he only has one eyebrow. Hu gibein ha'amur b'Torah. So the first position in the Mishnah of the Tanna Kama says that someone who doesn't have an eyebrow or doesn't have two eyebrows is referred to in the Torah as a giben. And we talk about the giben as one of the disqualifications biblically. Rabbi Dosa Omer, kol shegvinin shochvin. This is anybody who's, when we talk about the giben in the Torah, it means someone who has drooping eyebrows. They overhang over his face. So it will look very unusual, and therefore it's a disqualification. Rabbi Chanina ben Antigna Omer, Rabbi Chanina ben Antigna says, kol sheyesh lo shnei gabim ushtei shidraos. This is somebody who has two backs and two spines, which really means that he is so disfigured and so kind of bent over that he has this appearance. That's what Rabbi Chanina ben Antigna says is referred to in the Torah as a giben, which would mean that somebody who was missing eyebrows would be perfectly valid, according to him, to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. No, that might not be true. He might also agree about eyebrows, he just doesn't call that a giben. So yeah, but fundamentally, you've got issues. I mean, everybody else would agree that someone who's bent over is also blemished. Just they wouldn't call that the giben. Mishnah Gimel, hecharum pasul. Somebody who is a charum is also disqualified. Ezehu charum. What is a charum? So it says the Mishnah, hakochel shtei einav ke'echas. This is somebody who has such a sunken nose that if they were to apply makeup to their eyes, they would be able to do it with one swoop across their face because the nose is not getting in the way of them. Shtei einav lemala ushtei einav lemata. If a person has very high eyes or very low eyes, eino achas lemala ve'eino achas lemata. He has one eye that is higher than the other. Ro'e es hacheder ve'es ha'aliyah ke'echas. Someone who is cross-eyed, so they can see what the Mishnah is saying is you could see two things at once. You can see the room on the ground floor and the upper story, and it at the same time because of being cross-eyed. Sache shemesh, somebody who can't tolerate sunlight. Zugdos. Zugdos means that you have two differently colored eyes or two differently colored eyebrows. V'hatziran, and someone who's got very teary eyes. These are also going to be examples of disqualifications. V'shenashru risei einav pasul, and someone whose eyelashes have fallen out is also going to be disqualified. Mipnei maris ha'ayin, and the issue here, as with a lot of these blemishes, is just I guess almost the attention that you are drawing to yourself on account of looking so unusual, looking so disfigured, looking so so different. So again, it's not an easy topic to talk about, and we're taking it very much as a given. But these are the lists of disqualifications. We don't hide away from the fact that we have these Mishnayos, and certainly nowadays I'm sure they'll be subject to great scrutiny. But fundamentally, the appreciation of the importance of temple service, it's not that God has got a particular dislike or particular way that people have to look. We are not disqualifying Kohanim with blemishes from being Kohanim. It's just that they are disqualified from active service in the Beit HaMikdash. All the philosophical questions that get thrown up as a result of that, we have to deal with offline. So we continue with Mishnah Dalet. Mishnah Dalet talks about Einav Gadolos Kishel Egel. If a person's eyes are unusually large, like a calf, or Katanos Kishel Avaz, or they are particularly small, like those of a goose. Gufo Gadol Me'avarav, or his body is disproportionately large, relevant to his limbs, or Katan Me'avarav, or it's disproportionately small, relative to his limbs. Chatmo Gadol Me'avarav, his nose is disproportionately large, or Katan Me'avarav, or small. Hatzimem, V'hatzimeya. What is a tzimem and what is a tzimeya? So a tzimem, it tells us, I think. Yeah. Ezehu tzimeya. What is a tzimeya? Sha'aznav katanas. This is somebody with very small, shriveled ears. That hatzimem, somebody who is a tzimem, sha'aznav domos lispog. This is someone with large, puffy ears, whose ears are like a sponge. I wonder what Mishnah would say about boxers with their cauliflower ears. But that is our Mishnah nonetheless. Mishnah Hey. Safaso ha'elyona odefes ala tachtona. A person's lip, he's got an overbite. His upper jaw, his upper lip is protruding over his lower jaw. V'hatachtona odefes ala elyona, or the other way around. His lower lip is protruding beyond his upper lip. Harei zemum. This is considered a blemish. V'shanitlu shinav pasul, and someone who has no teeth is disqualified. Mipnei maris ha'ayin, because of the way that he looks. Dadav shoichavin kishel isha. If a person has breasts that look like a woman's breasts, kreisot sava, or if he has a very swollen, bloated stomach, taburo yotze, or his navel is protruding, or nichbe afilu achas liyamim, or he has epilepsy and he experiences seizures even if it's only once in a while. Ruach katzris ba'a alav, or if he is depressed. Hamushkan, somebody who has no testicles? No. Hamushkan? Oh, someone who has an unusually large scrotum. Val gever, somebody who has an unusually large member. So all of these are going to be disqualifications. And I guess this is only going to be known if it's clear and a person is he's not drawing attention, but on account of these unusual dimensioned appendages, people are noticing and being distracted by the way the person looks. Says the Mishnah, Ein lo beitzin, or Ein lo ela beitza achas. If a person has no testicles, or if he only has one testicle, Zehu maruach ashech ha'amur b'Torah. This is the term maruach ashech, which is mentioned in the Torah, where there's no clear translation, but there's just a chain of transmission as to what this title indicates. So the first position in our Mishnah says that it means that he has no testicles, or it means he only has one. Continues the Mishnah with some other opinions. Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Kol shenimrachu ashachav. It's somebody who has crushed testicles. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Kol shuruach bashachav. Rabbi Akiva says it is anybody with bloated testicles. And then, most different out of all of the options, Rabbi Chanina ben Antignas Omer, Rabbi Chanina ben Antignas says, Kol shemarav chashukin. It is anybody with an especially dark appearance, which you should keep in mind for a little bit later when we also talk about dark appearances in another context. Says the Mishnah in Mishnah Vav, Hamakish Bekarsulav. So somebody with bent ankles, meaning that when the ankles are touching, the knees do not touch each other. Now, you do see people that have slight bow-shaped legs and things like that, but I'm guessing these are quite extreme examples. So somebody with legs bent in such a way that when the ankles are touching, the knees are not. Uva akuvosav, or somebody with bent knees, so that when the legs are touching, the ankles are not able to come together. Uval pika, somebody who has extra appendages of skin on his hands or on his feet. Veha'ikel, somebody who is an ikel. Ezehu ikel. What is an ikel? Asks the Mishnah. Kol shemakif parsosav ve'ein akuvosav noshkos zolazo. This is anybody whose figure is bent in such a way that when he puts his feet together, the knees don't touch. He is bow-legged, as it says on the screen. Pika yotza migudalo. If a person has an extra finger emerging from his thumb. Akeva yotze la'achorav, or he seems to have another heel emerging. Parsaso rachava kishalavaz, or he has very flat feet like a goose. Etzba'osav mukavos zoazo, or he has extremely curled fingers and toes. I see, like very. How would you describe it? Somebody who's got very like fused fingers, God forbid, or very curled fingers, or klutos lemala adaperek, or he has webbed fingers and toes. Says the Mishnah, kasher, person whose hands are like this. No, I'm sorry. So if they are, I guess, fused, then they're going to be disqualified. But if they are webbed, so that they're only fusing until the middle joint of the hand or of the foot, then they're going to be kasher. But lamata min haperek v'chatacha. So if they were more webbed than that, they would be invalid. But if they were cut away and I guess surgically separated or whatever, then kasher, then they would be valid. If a person has an extra finger or a toe which gets removed, if it had contained a bone, then it would be then the person would be disqualified. And if not, then the person would be fit for active service. Yaser biyadav uvaraglav sheish v'sheish esrim v'arba. So if a person has extra fingers and toes on every one of his hands and feet, so that he's got six fingers on each, resulting in 24 fingers and toes, Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Yehuda would say that this person is fit for active service, and his proof for this is the fact that the Torah praises a giant at the end of the book of Samuel who had 24 digits and was very strong. The Chachamim posting, and the Chachamim say no, that this person would be disqualified because of his deformity. Now we go on to talking about somebody who is ambidextrous, right? Because you're supposed to do your service with a right hand. But if you are left-handed, then you wouldn't be able to use your left hand for active service. So the Mishnah says, Hasholet b'shtei yadav, if a person is ambidextrous and has full control over both of his hands, Rabbi posel, Rabbi says that this person would be disqualified. And the Chachamim say no, if you are able to control your right hand, then that's going to be fine. Continuing with the Mishnah says Hakushi. So Hakushi is someone who we would usually describe as someone with dark skin or black skin. So I would imagine that this is talking about someone with extremely dark skin as a result of a deformity, not necessarily as a result of regional appearance. But if you recall, we had earlier Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, who had defined a particular type of Maroach Asheich as someone with dark skin. So that's why it's interesting how this one comes up a little bit later on and would seem to contradict that opinion from a bit earlier. But in any event, the Kushi, someone with this unusually dark appearance, Vahagichor, someone with a very red appearance, I have it translated as, I don't think they translate it on the screen. V'halav kan, somebody who is albino. V'hakipeach, someone who is extremely lanky. V'hananas, someone who is dwarf-like. V'acheresh, someone who is deaf. V'ashoter, someone who has a degree of mental not mental illness, but somebody who is not operating at full intellect. What's the socially appropriate word for that nowadays? You're all struggling.
It's the learning disability.
Yes, that would probably be it. Someone with a learning disability. V'hashikur, somebody who is drunk. Uvale negayim, someone who uvale negayim tahoro, someone with discolorations like a mitzora, who would otherwise be declared pure. So he's not an impure mitzora, but he has blotches and discolorations on his skin. Psulim ba'adam. These things are going to disqualify a Cohen from active service. Uksherim babahema, even though they would be valid if they were found on an animal being used for a sacrifice. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, Shota kabahema ena min amuvcha. And if you have an animal who seems to have learning difficulties, then this would not be the best choice to use for a sacrifice. Rabbi Eliezer Omer af ba'alei dildulin. Rabbi Eliezer says even an animal which has pieces of skin hanging off its body, psulin ba'adam would disqualify. Sorry, af ba'alei dildulin, even pieces of skin which are dangling down from a person's body, psulin ba'adam, they would disqualify a kohen. Uksherim ba'behema, but they would still be valid in the case of an animal for a korban. Mishnah Zion, our last Mishnah of chapter 7. Well, if you want to hang on for a couple of minutes and just hear the end of the chapter. So, things by an animal that would invalidate an animal but not invalidate a kohen. Says the Mishnah, Elu kasherim ba'adam. These would be valid for a person, for a kohen, psulim ba'behema, but would disqualify an animal. Osov yesbano. If it was the instance of an animal and its child and its offspring being slaughtered on the same day, you can't do that for an animal, but father and son are allowed to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. Utrefa, if you've got an animal with an internal injury which is going to kill it off in a year, you wouldn't be allowed to use it for a korban, but if it was a kohen, he would still be allowed to serve. V'yotze dofen, if a kohen was born by cesarean, he's still allowed to work. But an animal can't be used for a sacrifice if it was born by cesarean. And if you've got a kohen who has committed a sin or has killed another person, he would still be allowed to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. Obviously need to hope that no one witnessed him, because that would be a problem. And teshuvah might be recommended. But it would disqualify an animal, but wouldn't inherently disqualify a person. Hanose nashim ba'aveira, if a person marries a woman who he should not be allowed to marry, such as a divorcee or somebody who underwent the chalitza process. So the Mishnah says, pasul ad shiyader hanaya. He would not be allowed to serve in the Beis HaMikdash until he had vowed to never get any benefit from her whatsoever. Doesn't have to divorce her, but he's not allowed to have any benefit from her. And this is interesting because this does still remain until today, that if a kohen marries a woman who he was not halachically allowed to marry, then it does have ramifications on his ability to be called up as a kohen and to be able to duchen in shul. Hamitame lamesim, a person who becomes impure, becomes tameh, pasul, is going to be disqualified from service. But this is also somebody who is habitually not careful about coming into contact with tumah. Until he decides and until he declares and until he commits to not put himself into these situations where he is going to become tamei. So there we go, guys. Mazel tov on completing chapter 7. To all those sticking around for the next chapter, we are going to move on to chapter 8. Perek Ches, our penultimate chapter, where we are finally going to talk about firstborn children. Right? So we had our firstborn animals, and now we had our Maisa Behema, and we're also going to have our firstborn children now, and the concept of the Pidyon Haben. So the two main halachas that we need to be aware of with regards to this is that a firstborn son must be redeemed. Pidyon Haben must be redeemed by paying 5 slaim, 5 silver coins, and they have to do that at 30 days, and it has to be given to a Cohen. So a child born to a Cohen or to a Levi is excluded from this mitzvah, but for Yisrael, this is what they have to do, number 1. And number 2 is the concept of being the firstborn with regards to inheritance, the Bechorot lenachala. So a firstborn inherits double from his father's assets. So it's the firstborn child for Pidyon Haben, firstborn child for inheritance. With regards to firstborn child for Pidyon Haben, it has to be the firstborn child of the mother. With regards to inheritance, it has to be the firstborn child of the father. Not only that, but the firstborn child for Pidyon Haben has to have been the first womb-based and womb-delivered child. And with regards to inheritance, it has to have been the first, legitimate, as it were, child of the father. So here we go. Mishnah Aleph of chapter 8. Yesh bechor lenachala ve'eno bechor lakohen. You can have a child born who will be designated firstborn for inheritance, even though he won't be requiring a Pidyon Haben. Bechor lakohen ve'eno bechor lenachala. And a baby could be born, which is a firstborn which needs redemption, but is not the firstborn with regards to inheritance. Or bechor lenachala ve'lakohen. Or you can have both. A child who is born who ends up being the firstborn for inheritance and needs a pidyon. You can have a child born who is neither a firstborn for inheritance or for a kohen, even though they were the first child born. Asks the Mishnah, who is a child who could be the firstborn for inheritance but not for pidyon haben? Answers the Mishnah, Haba achar hanefalim sheyatza rosh ochai. So the Mishnah says it is somebody, a child born after a stillborn child. Is that what it says on the screen? Who came after a miscarriage of an underdeveloped fetus, even where the head of the undeveloped fetus emerged alive. So it would seem to have been a child born after there was another child, but where that child was not going to be able to survive. Or uventisha shiyatza roshomes, or a full-term child where the baby was stillborn. V'hamapeles kamin behema chayva off, or where the first child was a miscarriage and did not have a full-fledged human appearance. So in those instances, Divrei Rabbi Meir says those are the types of instances where the first live, healthy born baby would not be requiring a pidyon haben. The Chachamim say, Ad shehei bo mitzras ha'adam. The Chachamim would say that it has to I don't understand what it says there on the screen. Until he has suras ha'adam, until he has a human look to him. he will not be somebody who has a pidyon haben and also being the firstborn for inheritance. Continues the Mishnah, Hamapeles sandal. If a miscarriage is if the miscarried fetus is in the form of a sandal, which means that it's just a flattened form, or shilya, or where it's need some English words to describe this, from whom an afterbirth or a gestational sac in which tissue developed. So basically, a shilya is the, I guess, like the placenta is released by the mother, but there's no viable child inside. Ushfir murukam, or it's a miscarriage, but there is mass substance to the miscarriage. Vayotze mechutach, or there are pieces or semblances of human form contained within the miscarriage. So haba achrehen, if a child is born after those miscarriages, bechor lanachala ve'eno bechor lakohen. So then the child that is born healthy will be firstborn for the purposes of inheritance, but not a firstborn with regards to pidyon haben. Mi shelohayu lo vanim. If a person had no children before, v'nasa isha shekvar yalda, and marries a woman who has previously given birth, or oda shivcha v'nishtachra, or if he marries a woman who was still a maidservant, she was an Eved Kanani, and then she is released, then she is freed. Oda Nachris V'nisgaira, or marries a non-Jew and then she converts. Mishibas li Yisrael Yalda, once she has a child as a Jew, so she becomes Jewish and then she gives birth. So the Mishnah says, Bechor Nachala, the child will be firstborn for inheritance, Va'eno Bechor Kohen, but will not be the firstborn with regards to pidyon haben. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, in such an instance of somebody who earns or becomes Jewish and then has a child, Bechor Nachala Vela Kohen. Interesting. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says this child will be the firstborn for inheritance as well as for pidyon haben. And this is all to do about whether this child, right, if she's pregnant in these slave status or non-Jewish status, and then she gives birth as a Jew, so there's clearly machlokes as to whether the father is considered the halachic father or not, with regards to the status. Shenemar peter kol rechem bivnei Yisrael, because the verse says peter kol rechem, the opening of any womb, bivnei Yisrael, amongst the children of Israel, which means ad sheyifteru rechem Yisrael, until the womb opens of a Jew. So that's why it's not clear. Mishehayu lo vanim. If somebody has children, no. So this is the next clause. So the point is that as long as the woman is Jewish when she's giving birth, so then the child is going to have Jewish status. But it's a machlokes then between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and the Tanna Kama as to whether the father is considered the halachic father or not, with regards to firstborn inheritance and firstborn for pidyon haben. Misha hayu lo banim, if a father has had children before, but nasa isha shelo yalda, he marries a woman who has never had children, nizgaira meuberes, or the woman converts while she is pregnant, nishtachra meuberes, or she is a slave is redeemed, is freed while she is pregnant, yaldahi vechohenes. So if so, if a, So if she gives birth and she is a married to Cohen, he uleviyah, she gives birth and she is married to a Levi, he ve'isha shekva yalda, or she is a woman who has previously given birth, or she's been previously married and she didn't wait 3 months after the end of the first marriage and the beginning of her next marriage, which would mean that if she has a child 6 months later, we wouldn't know if this is a full-term 9-month child of the first husband, or ben shiva la'acharon, or if it is a 7-month pregnancy of the second husband. So then in these instances, Bechor Kohen, ve'eno Bechor nachala. This would be an instance where the child could be a firstborn for Pidyon Haben, but not for inheritance. So I think I translated it as married to a Kohen. I think it's not. I think it's she was the daughter of a Kohen, or the daughter of a Levi, and she married a Yisrael. Let me see. Israelite woman and the daughter of a wife of a priest. I'm confused there. Oh wow. Okay, with regards to children, they get mixed up. If you somehow mix your child up with a daughter of a Kohen or a daughter of a Levi, that's where the Mishnah is saying that it's going to be Bechor la Kohen ve'eno Bechor la nachala. It's going to be a Bechor for firstborn, for Pidyon Haben, and not for inheritance. Eizahu Bechor la nachala ve'la Kohen. What are the examples of a firstborn for inheritance and for Pidyon Haben? Hamapeles shafir maledam. If a person miscarries a shafir maledam, a gestational sac filled with blood, so it doesn't have any body parts. Malei mayim, or it's filled with water. Malei gininim, or it's filled with gininim, for the water, for the blood, for the pieces of flesh. I guess pieces of flesh is gininim. Hamapeles kamin dagim, or they miscarry with a mass that resembles a fish. V'chagavim, or grasshoppers, shkatzim, or ramashim, or creepy crawlies. So these I guess are all different types of miscarriages, where maybe there's no kind of viability to the miscarriage. Hamapeles yom arba'im, one who miscarriages within the first 40 days. Haba achrehen b'chol nachala v'la kohen. So any child that comes afterwards would still be obligated in Pidyon Haben, and would also be considered the firstborn with regards to inheritance. Either way, we obviously hope and pray that people should never be in these situations, because it's very, very sad. Mishnah base, talking about the case where someone could be a firstborn for a Kohen, for Pidyon Haben, and not for inheritance. So it says the Mishnah, Yotze dofen v'haba acharav. If there is a Caesarean child born, then the child who comes after that, Shnehem einon bechor lo nachala v'lo kohen. Neither of them are going to be firstborn for Pidyon Haben or for inheritance. Rabbi Shimon Omer harishon lanachala, the firstborn by Caesarean, according to Rabbi Shimon, is going to be firstborn for inheritance. V'asheni lechamesh slayim, and the second one is going to be obligated in Pidyon Haben, because that is the firstborn child born of the womb. That's very interesting. Mishnah Gimel. Mishnah Gimel. Mishalo Bichra Ishto V'yalda Shnei Zacharim. A woman who has never given birth before, and she gives birth to 2 males, 2 boys. Nosen Chamesh Slayim LaKohen. So one of those boys is obligated in Pidyon Haben. So you give 5 selah, 5 coins to the Kohen. Meis Echad Mehen B'toch Shloshim Yom. What if one of them dies, God forbid, within the first 30 days, and you're not sure which one was first out? So the Mishnah says ha'av patur. The father is exempt from giving the pidyon haben because you can't know for certain that the remaining living child was the firstborn. Meis ha'av v'habanim kayamim. If the father was to die and the children are kayamim, the children are still alive, Rabbi Meir says, Im nasnu ad shelo chalku nasanu. If they had paid the Cohen before they divided the inheritance, before they divided the father's property, so then nisanu, then it stays within the possession of the Cohen. The imlav paturim, and if not, then they are exempt from continuing if there's no certainty. Rabbi Yehuda says nischayvu nechasim. Rabbi Yehuda says the obligation to pay the Kohen took effect already on the property of the father. So therefore, if it hadn't been paid and the father passes, then the obligation, says Rabbi Yehuda, is for them to take his assets and use that to pay for the pidyon haben. Mishnah says Zachar nekeva ein kan lakohen klum. If the mother gave birth to a boy and a girl, and it was not known which one was born first, ein kan lakohen klum, and there's no pidyon at all because there's no certainty that the boy was born first. Mishnah Daled. Continuing on. Shtei nashim shelo bikru v'yaldu shnei zacharim. If you have two women who've never given birth and they both give birth to boys. No sen eser slime la kohen. So now there's two requirements for pidyon haben, and so the kohen's going to get 10 coins. Meis echad mehem b'soch shloshim yom. If one of those children, God forbid, died within the first 30 days, im la kohen echad matzan. So if you gave all 10 coins to one priest, to one Kohen, yachazir lo chamesh slaim, then unfortunately the Kohen has to give 5 slaim back because one of the children didn't make it to 30 days. Im lishnei kohanim nasan. If these 5 coins were given to 2 different Kohanim, eino yachol lotzi miyadam, and there's no way of extracting that money back. Zachar and nekeva. If 2 women gave birth, one to a boy, one to a girl, or shnei zacharim and a keva, or to 2 boys and a girl, no saying chamesh slaim la kohen. So then you can still give 1 pidyon to the kohen because you definitely know that one of these boys was firstborn. Shtei nekevos was zachar, or shnei zacharim was shtei nekevos. But if they gave birth to 2 girls and a boy, or to 2 boys and to 2 girls, ein kan lakohen klum. There's no way of proving that the firstborns were boys, and so the Kohen gets nothing. Achas bikra v'achas shelo bikra. If one was a firstborn and one was not, v'yaldu shnei zacharim, and they both give birth to boys, no sen chamesh slaim la kohen. You can still give 5 slaim to the Kohen because you know that one of them was a firstborn. Meis echad mehem b'soch shloshim yom. If one of them dies within 30 days, ha'av patur, then they're going to be exempt because there's no way of knowing that the child that made it to 30 days was the child born of the mother who had never given birth before. Meis ha'av v'habanim kayamim. If the father died and the children were still alive, Rabbi Meir, im nasnu ad shelo chalku nisanu. So Rabbi Meir says if the money was given before the father's assets were divided up, then the money stays with the Kohen. V'imlav paturim, and if not, then you're actually exempt from giving this money. Rabbi Yehuda says nischayvu nechasim. The assets are going to be obligated in paying this money. Zachar and nekeva, but if you gave birth to a boy and to a girl, and only one of these mothers had never given birth before, ein kan lakohen klum, and you can't give anything to a kohen because you don't know for certain which one was born of was the firstborn child. Mishnah Hey. Here we've got 2 women, 2 men, and 2 children, and we don't know who's who. Shtei nashim shel shnei anashim. You've got 2 women married to 2 men. Shelo bikru, and they've never given birth before. V'yaldu shnei zacharim. They give birth to 2 boys. Zeno sen chamesh slaim la kohen, v'zeno sen chamesh slaim la kohen. Each one gives 5 coins to the kohen. If one of the children dies within 30 days, if one Cohen received the 10 coins, so then he can give back 5 coins, and then I guess they can just split those 5 coins between them. But if you gave it to 2 Kohanim, then you can't extract the money from the Kohen, from either one of the Kohanim. If they give birth, one to a boy, one to a girl, then the father is exempt. But interestingly, the son is going to be obligated to redeem himself when he gets older. If they give birth to 2 girls and a boy, or to 2 boys and to 2 girls, then the Kohen receives nothing, because both of these mothers may have had a girl first, and you've got no way of proving. Mishnah Vav. Achas bikra v'achas shelo bikra. You've got one mum who's given birth before, and you've got one mum who has never given birth before. Shel shnei anashim, and there are 2 husbands in the picture. V'yaldu shnei zacharim, and they give birth to 2 boys. Zeh shelo bikra ishto, the one that had never given birth before, nosen chamesh slayim lakohen. They would give 5 coins to the Kohen. Zachar nekeva ein kan lakohen klum. If it was a boy and a girl, then the Kohen would receive nothing. Meis habein b'toch 30 yom. If the boy dies within the first 30 days, afal pisha nasan lakohen, even if you had for whatever reason given the money already to the Kohen, yachazir lo chamesh shlayim, the money has to go back because he didn't make it to full term, to this 30-day threshold. La'achar 30 yom, after 30 days, afal pisha lo nasan yitain, even if you hadn't yet had the chance to give the money to the Kohen to redeem the firstborn, then you still have to give the money to the Kohen. Meis biyom shloshim, if the baby, God forbid, was to die on day 30 itself, the Mishnah says kiyom shalafanav, it's considered like day 29, and the obligation for pidyon haben hasn't yet elapsed. Rabbi Akiva says in nasan lo yitom, but there's a doubt, says Rabbi Akiva, if this happened on day 30, if you had given the money already, you don't take it back. V'im lo nasan lo yitem, and if you hadn't given the money, then you don't give the money, because of that doubt about day 30 being a point at which you are obligated or not. If the father, God forbid, dies within the first 30 days of the baby's life, then it's we assume that he didn't redeem the child until proof is brought that he had done. After 30 days, then we assume that he did redeem his child until you can bring proof that he hadn't done, in which case there would still be an obligation for this child to be redeemed. What if you've got a situation where a father was a firstborn and hadn't ever been redeemed, and his son is also a firstborn and needs to be redeemed, but you've only got 5 slayim to be able to do so? Hu kodem es bano. He should take priority over his son, and he should make sure that he pays for his own redemption. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. But not kodma. The son comes first, shemitzvaso alaviv, because the father has a mitzvah to redeem his own son. Whereas, one second, let me try that one again. The son takes precedence. The son takes precedence. Why? Shemitzvaso alaviv, because his need to be redeemed was actually his father's mitzvah to do. It's just that his father never did it. Umitzvas beno alav, and the redemption of his son is on him to perform. So that's why he has to do the mitzvah, which is actually incumbent on him to do, and then afterwards, once he's got more money, he can redeem himself. Mishnah Zion. What kind of coins are we using for this mitzvah? Chamesh slayim shal ben, with regards to these 5 coins to redeem a little firstborn son, but manet, sorry, we are going by the Syrian maneh. Shloshim shel eved. So this is with regards to pidyon eved. With regards to the 30 shekels, which gets paid to the owner of an eved Kanaani, a Canaanite slave who gets killed by an ox. V'chamishim shel ones v'shel nefata, and the 50 shekels paid by a rapist and by a seducer. These are all biblical punishments which have financial value. Umea shel motzi shem ra, the 100 shekels that have to be paid by somebody who casts a bad name about someone. Kulam b'shekel hakodesh. These are all paid as shekels of the Kodesh, holy temple shekalim, b'manet sari, which are valued by the value of a Syrian money. V'chulan niftim b'chesef, and all of these are redeemed with coins, uv'shavek kesef, or with the value of or items which are equal in value, chutz min shekalim, except for the mitzvah of paying half a shekel each year to the temple. That has to be done with a half shekel coin, whereas other things can be done with things equivalent to the value of 5 shekels, 30 shekels, 50 shekels, 100 shekels. Mishnah Ches, Ein podin lo ba'avadim. You cannot redeem your child with slaves who are valued at 5 slime, v'lo b'shtaros, or with IOU documents that have no inherent value, v'lo b'karkaos, and not with property because it is not movable, v'lo b'hekdeshus, and not with anything which is consecrated. Kasav lakohen shu chayav lo 5 slaim. If he wrote a note to say that he owes 5 slaim to the father, chayav liten lo uvno eino fadui. So if this need to pay back, if this IOU came at the same time as him needing to pay a kohen 5 slaim for the redemption, so he would have to give that 5 slaim because he owes him. Uvno eino fadui, but the son is not going to be redeemed. Lefichach im ratza kohen liten lo matana rashai. Therefore, if he wants to give 5 slaim as a gift, if the Cohen wants to give back the 5 coins as a gift, he would be allowed to do so. Hamafrish pidyon beno va'avad. If he separated money to give as a redemption for his son, and then that money got lost, chayiv b'achara yosas, and then he needs to get another 5 coins. Shneimar yihyeh lach ufadotiv day. Surely has to redeem his firstborn son. So if he loses that money, he has to make sure to actually pay that money still. Mishnah Tes. I think we're talking about inheritance again. So, Habachor notel pi shnayim b'nichsei ha'av. The firstborn child is entitled to 2 portions of his father's assets when the father passes away. Ve'eno notel pi shnayim b'nichsei ha'em. He is not halachically entitled to 2 portions of the assets of the mother when the mother passes away. Ve'eno notel pi shnayim b'shevach, and he. So if the father dies, leaving behind a certain amount, and then the value of his assets go up, he's not entitled to 2 portions of the increased value. So he's only entitled to 2 portions of what the father left behind. Anything else he has to split evenly. V'lo ra'ui keva muchzak. And he is not also not entitled to things which would come to the father after he dies before the assets are split. So if the grandfather was to die after the father, and then the father would be inheriting his father's assets, that does not mean that the firstborn is entitled to 2 portions of those assets as well. V'lo ha'isha b'ksuvasa, and a woman does not get to take these portions for her kasuba. I think while the sons are alive, because she would have to be sustained, I think, by the sons. V'lo habanos b'mazono sehen, and the daughters do not take this share of the assets for their from these additional things. So that's what it is. The woman can't claim from these additional assets which came to the husband after his death. She can't use those assets to pay for her kasuba. And the daughters can't be sustained by these additional assets. V'lo hayava. And the brother who would marry a deceased brother's wife can only inherit what was due to them, but not from these additional things. They can't take from these additional valued items after the person passes, and also are not entitled to taking any of the things that come to them after after the person dies. And finally, to finish chapter 8 for tonight, the unique halacha of Jubilee, which would mean that land would be restored, would be returned in Eretz Yisrael to the original owners. So Elu she'enon chozrim biyovel. These are the people who do not have their ancestral fields returned to the original owners during the 50th year of the cycle, the Jubilee cycle. Bechorot, which is the Bechorot. Come on, we're running out of time. The double portion. Bechorot. Oh, I think so. So if he received an extra portion, he inherited his father's property as a Bechor. So he does not return this extra portion at the time of the Jubilee. V'hayoresh es ishto, and a person who inherits his wife's property does not return it to her family at the time of Jubilee. V'hamiyabeim es eshes achiv, and a person who marries the wife of his brother because he died without children, he gets his brother's property, and that doesn't go back to the ancestral family again at the Jubilee. Vamatana, and anything that was given, any land that was gifted, does not go back to its original owners. Divrei Rabbi Meir. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim say, Matana kamecher, a gift of land would be like a sale, and it must be returned as well. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kulan chozrim biyara. All of these things have to be returned at the point of Jubilee. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka says, Hayeresh esishta, somebody who inherits his wife after she passes, Yachazir livnei mishpacha, the land would be returned to the members of her family, V'nake lahem min adamim, and the family should deduct from the monetary value of the land, which gets explained in the Gemara. But what I think it refers to is the burial place for the wife. So they deduct the money that I guess that was spent, they have to. They inherit the land back, but the value of the burial place is somehow impacted. But that gets explained in the Gemara. Whew! So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will say Mazel Tov on completing chapter 8 of Maseches Bechoros. Well, here we go. I actually do have some notes here. So Rabbi Eliezer says, all extra inheritance gets returned to be redivided. And according to this last position that we had, Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, the inheritance doesn't go back to the wife's family, except if the husband inherited the burial plot of the extended family. So if he's got now in his possession, the burial plots of her family, he can agree to sell those back, but he can't collect for his wife's burial plot because he was obligated to pay for that. So that's what it means when he returns the land back to the family, and he can take back the value of what he's giving back to them, but the value of his burial plot is his wife's burial plot is deducted from that. Oh, now it makes way more sense. Right, Mazel Tov everybody on completing chapter 8, and we'll see you next time. Join us again as we finish Maseches Bechorot. But in the meantime, have a wonderful and meaningful evening.